This is my Dodge Caravan before the front got broken. Backed up to the main door in the back of the big building. This is the main radar building. This really, we should go to this picture later. That's essentially what it is.
All I know is what I got here. I don't know what the deal is.
All right, let's go to the next picture. It's out of focus. This is leaving the site. Of course, there's my car again. And the red building is one of the old leftover radar buildings that they didn't use. The round things, we don't know what the hell the round things were.
Hey,
this is the street coming out.
Okay.
That's the back end of the main antenna. This thing is an antenna which is roughly 300 foot by 200 foot. And that tower that goes this way, the game horn is mounted on. That's the omnidirectional antenna. And the little thing on top that's shaped like that is the IFF antenna.
What's this radar used for? Is this for the project?
Yeah, this is
the transmitter?
This is the transmitter. You're looking at the transmitter.
In
fact, anyone that has any sensitivities, this is a full shot of the building. Anybody that has any sensitivity can probably feel the energies coming off this picture.
This is a fallen tower, or
Do we
what?
have a
That's an
pointer?
extra tower.
Do we have a pointer for him so he doesn't have to... Pointer, something, a stick or something.
Oh, yes, we have a
Good,
poker.
okay. Here we go.
Is when the pointer comes. This is going to be a riot using a fireplace. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 floors in this structure. Each one is about 100 foot square.
This is the transmitter?
This is the transmitter building. The transmitter was on this floor, and this floor, and this was the antenna controller. All these ducts here are cooling for the transmitter.
That's just sitting there open?
Yep,
They're looking for a lawsuit.
yep.
Go ahead.
This is
Just
another
narrate
picture, another site, another picture of the building with the antenna. Again, you can see doors you can look out. This is all open. We know it was open as of September.
You can walk inside the building.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
This is a shot.
Upside down.
Alternate reality.
This is just essentially background. Let's keep going. This is another one of those round structures. What they did with these in the project, if anything, we don't know, and they didn't look maintained. You can see it's all rusted over here, and, here, and, but you can see that that other building was maintained. This was like about 85, these pictures were taken. Okay. This is a shot from the roof looking up at the antenna. This is a catwalk. People walked here. You can get an idea of the massive size of this thing.
This is the antenna?
This is the antenna, transmitting antenna. This is shot out over, that's the ocean, from the roof of the building.
Okay. Don't change a bit here.
This is the group. This person should be familiar. That person should be familiar. This is my friend Jeff that comes up from Maryland. That's the guy that plays Rambo running around the woods.
Now those buildings in the back?
That's two of those round buildings. You can see they haven't been maintained. Look at the doors here.
Did you go inside of them?
Yeah,
And you couldn't tell what it was all about?
there isn't anything in them. Nothing in them. Those are cleaned out.
And those buildings you can still walk in now?
If they haven't boarded up, sure.
Okay.
I don't know. This is a picture of what they call the omnidirectional antenna. This is what the antenna they use. In fact, if you look, you see all the wires feeding in, all the coax cables feeding in. This they use to send out a signal, but we believe they use this more for picking up signals. This would pick up a return from the person that they were targeting. Because it has one huge cable that goes up to it and a bunch of little cables for receivers. And they control the different dipoles on this. Okay, let's go. This is a general shot of the antenna. That's the gain horn. See, they were first focusing this so the signal would go in, bounce off, come out. What they finally realized is they didn't want the Hertzian component that reflected, So they positioned it so the gain horn pointed right at the subject. That's the way they eventually developed this thing so it worked right.
Outside.
Outside,
The
yeah.
subject was outside.
The subject was in another building that was downrange.
The focal point was at that building.
Yeah. This is a distance view of the thing. You can get an idea how massive it is.
What are the dimensions approximately?
300 feet by 200, 150 feet. 100 feet this
125
way.
tons for the antenna and 125 tons for the control mechanism on that roof.
That's the pedestal here.
125 tons each.
This weighs 125 tons and this is about 200 tons.
Did you help design this transmission antenna?
No, that was part of the Sage.
Okay.
A wiped out shot. But this is interesting. This is essentially the main building. This is the transmitter building. This is the control center where all the computers were, and this was offices.
Where was the subject?
Down the hill that way.
Okay, in another building, yeah.
Now those buildings are still there, are they
Oh, yes.
open?
This one is open. I'm told this one is open, and this one is open, and the powerhouse is open.
I assume
This is a
that-
distance shot. You're 2 miles away here from the building. Montauk Highway. Same thing. You're 2 miles away here. I don't know what that is. Oh yeah, you're
Yes,
further
way
away.
down.
This is now this is in the town still. This is like about 5 miles away here. That's the building.
And no telephone.
What about this, Cameron?
This building here is where they had the subject. This is how many people know what the planetary grid is?
I know.
Yeah.
This is one of the cross points of the grid.
Wow.
You stand here, you'll feel the grid.
And it's still there.
Yep.
That plot of land.
And if we have the right picture, you'll see they arranged the buildings around the cross point like the Indians arrange mounds of rock around the cross points. These buildings tune the cross point. But they focused, if I remember, on that building, was where they had the subject. You know, these buildings are, Duncan verified it, that's where he was.
Okay.
Duncan has a tendency to flip when he sees stuff like this. Okay, let's go to the next one. That's me. Standing next to the radar site 5 miles away. And you see my welding glasses.
Yes.
Another shot. You can go on. That's extraneous.
Do these power lines go straight to that
Yep.
location?
They go straight to that
And all they are
location.
is to carry...
Those high tension,
Wow.
Right here, you can see the high tension lines.
are they still active?
Oh yeah. Those are what supply the point. Okay.
I mean, are they active?
Here's a
to
picture of
that
the
point?
pedestal. These are motors for them. The motors are gone today.
This is on the roof.
This is on the
Okay.
roof.
Motors are gone?
Yeah, someone took the motors. How? I don't know.
And how they got them down, right?
Oh, that's on
If
top
they
of the
pushed them
building.
off and let them crash, there'd be big crevices in the ground, but we didn't heard of any crevices. Train freaks may have taken these, because these are the same motors that run the big locomotives. This is a picture of the gain horn. This is the thing, this is about the size of my Volkswagen Rabbit at the time. This is what actually sent the signal out. It went out like this. More waveguide went down the catwalk and went into the building.
We're looking at it sideways.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, there's the UFO landing pad.
That was their landing pad, right?
What is that?
That's the only one of these round little buildings that's maintained.
Oh, right.
Where's the pink building? There, we just kind of...
That's another
Okay,
thing
that's
out.
an old radar building that wasn't maintained. This is the main operations center. This is where they had all the computers. And the chair was right below this building, we figure. And then that's the office building there. That's where Jack Pruitt and what's his
Now,
face?
which building was the subject in? Can we see it there?
Huh?
Can we see the building the subject was in from here?
No.
Okay.
Another same area essentially. But you notice these are not maintained. This one's nicely maintained.
Right.
Some people believe thoroughly that they landed UFOs here. This is a shot of the lighthouse from the roof.
Well, the lighthouse isn't far away. is
No.
Oh, wow.
it? One of those two little
Buildings?
Maintenance buildings of some
used
sort.
maintenance buildings.
I don't think they've
The
been used
structure
in
on the
years
right,
and
what's
years.
that?
It's the same.
That's the red radar site. They had a big bubble on top of that at one time, but hasn't been there for years. Same shot, just different lens.
This base had been constructed during World War II or something like that?
No, after the 50s.
After.
Looks like we just had that shot.
No, this is a
No, it's a little
view of.
It's a little
Yeah.
different.
He took a lot of shots.
Yes, Jan took tons of shots.
What is this?
That is what's left of the old Fort Hero. There was gun emplacements in there. There's a emergency generator in that building now. Well, there was. Closest I could figure from the wiring.
Where
was
were the
something
4
from-
megawatt generators in the
You'll see
transmitter?
him. No, you'll see him. Go on. That's another shot of the red building.
Why a pink building?
Which was the building where there were marks, you say, on the walls?
Well, we
All
see
of them. I don't know if we got good enough detail to see them. I don't know why you took a shot at that, but
He liked it.
he liked it.
Show me what you got here.
Same thing.
Yeah. Gonna go in a distance. Or
I think the screen's
That's the
okay.
Ma Bell Tower. He took a shot at that too.
all right, Felipe.
He took a shot of that one.
Okay.
The Ma Bell building, of course, is at the base of it. Something new and different. I never understood why. Oh yeah, this is a maintenance shed. This is the diesel tank that ran the generators. Okay, there's the building that the subject was in, from the roof. There's the cross point, and there's the tuning buildings around the cross point. The government built this, and the state, this is a state park today, the state's been told they cannot tear these buildings down.
Oh, really?
Yep,
They cannot what?
they cannot tear these buildings down.
Are they being maintained? Can you still get in them? What?
I don't know.
You didn't try to.
Can you go inside those? Or those
I've been in the buildings, but I don't
You
know
get
if they're
any sense
open.
when you're in it psychically?
Oh yeah, even I can pick it up, and I have the sensitivity of
You
a
can
rock.
just drive there and walk into those buildings.
Well, you drive in the parking lot of Montauk Point State Park and then walk back.
Now, is
about
that
a 2
gate
mile-
there? Is that the gate
it's a 2 mile
separating the
walk.
state park from the?
That's a
This,
long
no,
walk.
this is
That's a
just
long
pipes
walk.
going over the
Okay,
buildings,
but
over the walkway.
you can drive there.
No, you can't
through-
drive up here. They got gates that are closed.
Okay,
that's,
okay.
But you can walk in and around and you can get there.
That's
I saw cars there when you were there.
Well, we had their permission to be in there to take pictures and stuff like that. This is just another shot of over there. You can see how far away they were focusing, and they were focusing right on this building here.
Yeah.
It was right in line of sight.
But you can drive into the main base.
No,
part.
not now.
No,
No,
you just gotta walk through.
you gotta walk in.
That's a long walk.
Yeah, especially on a cold day.
Yeah,
You
no,
have
I-
permission, when did you go with the cars?
This was May
May of 86.
When it was warm?
'86. Yeah.
May of '86?
Yeah.
You have a letter?
Yeah, we had a letter.
That letter no good now?
No, it's not any good now.
What is that tank?
This is the diesel fuel tank that ran the generator station.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know why you took a picture of that. Except you can see again the building where the subject was of the early experiments. Same thing. There's the building
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Interest here.
Let's keep going. There's the powerhouse. This thing has 4 huge diesel generators, and you can see the cooling towers for each. They used 2, they had one ready to go, and one was being repaired.
How big were those things, would you say?
Megawatt,
I mean, how physically, how big? How long, high?
size of a locomotive. They were locomotive engines, essentially.
Really?
Now, if the power went out coming in on those trunk lines, though, that wouldn't be enough power to power this
Well, they
vortex, would it?
originally used this to run the station, but what happened is they discovered when they turned on, it created such time disturbances, it gave the generators the heebie-jeebies and they went down. So they put the generators down permanently and ran off a loco.
Right.
But the generators had the heebie-jeebies. This is another shot of the power station.
Oh, you were really in there.
Yep. Another shot over, I think this is the bay between the ports. Same thing.
Where the antenna is?
That's one part of the antenna.
I don't know if this is, I got this right.
That's a shot of that other gantry from the roof. You saw that thing next to my car.
Yeah.
You see, that hasn't been maintained either.
Do I have it right?
Yeah.
Is it
There's
down?
stuff strewn all over the space.
Now, are you saying that this 30-foot creature was doing stuff to things like this, or no?
Yeah, we think that was part of it.
Ripped it off, you mean?
Yeah. If I see anything that's obvious, I'll let you know.
I don't know, there's not a whole lot more yet. There's a lot of duplicates that I didn't use.
No, that's nothing. You've seen that.
So now we go inside.
Yeah, okay. That's a choke. That's a charging reactor.
Can you focus that a little better?
Could you speak a little louder, please? Preston?
This is what they call a charging choke. This is a filter choke, I'm sorry. The rectifiers are up in there. They had big multi-disc rectifiers up in there. You know,
What material are they
what I call hockey pucks. Huh?
What type of material are they used to rectify something like
Silicon.
They're solid state, so
Yeah. I call them hockey
silicon
pucks.
or selenium?
Silicon. I call them hockey pucks. This is one of the power tubes. This is called an amplitron. That's the tube right there. And those are the magnets for it. And the pulse transformer is in this oil-filled tank. And this crane lifts this thing out.
How
And
big
this
is that
other-
diameter
3
on
foot.
the anode?
3 foot.
Is this part of the equipment that was, that had to be destroyed, or is it just?
No, they left this behind. Let's go on. This is a tube fully assembled with all the magnets on it. This thing is about 6 foot tall from here to here.
Preston, that would never be used for radar, is that correct?
They originally used it for radar. This was long distance radar,
Uh-huh.
but then they rebuilt them. Another shot of the amplitron. I never noticed a red floor before. Is Al here?
Yeah, I'm here.
You ever noticed a red floor?
No.
Something funny going on.
When we were in there, part of it was red, and I don't recall what parts.
This is a close-up of the amplitron.
When you look at the walls in the back of that, you can see the marks.
They just abandoned all this equipment. It's very unusual.
This is some of the acetylene torch marks where they cut the waveguides to stop it. This is the power transformer. This thing probably is about 12 tons. This is the type of thing that I tell Duncan move. He grunts, he groans a little, and he moves it.
Mungo like beans.
Yeah. This is a thyrotron. This is the main pulse modulator. They use 4 of these things. This is about 2.5 foot tall, this tube. And about 6 inches in diameter.
Wow.
And they had 4 of these in parallel to fire off the pulse forming network.
Now, that wasn't just sitting there, was it?
Yeah,
I hope you got it.
yes.
Oh, good.
Well, this is one of the ones that's broken. I got complete ones, good ones.
These were made in the 50s?
These particular ones were made in the 80s,
Wow.
but they were designed in the 50s. That's 500 Gauss magnet. That's the label on one of the magnets you can go on. That doesn't mean a hell of a lot.
Except for the stamp Sperry on it.
Yeah, much else, except for,
I don't know what that is.
anyway, that's it.
That was
Wonder
on
where the
wall.
collapsed building is.
The what?
Wonder where the collapsed building is.
It might have been in some of the others. I got some more here if you want to run through them.
It's up to you guys.
They're all duplicates.
If you want to run through quick, go ahead.
I didn't see it, Preston, the duplicates.
They're all duplicates.
There was also better pictures showing the torch marks.
Could be. I'll do it if you want. Okay.
It's up to you
No,
guys.
let's do it. Whatever.
If you want to do it, you
Just
can
tell
go
me
through
what's
them
the
quick.
deal.
That same thing, go on.
Zip through fast.
I'm good at this.
Another shot of the
Simple
portal,
fast.
of the vortex,
Another portal.
of the cross point, I'm sorry. Same thing.
Didn't seem to stop him from running a power line
Okay.
on top of it.
Can you back up one?
Yeah.
Back up to what you had there, please. Before.
In here, right?
Between that one, it's a different time period of the day. The
Right.
energetics of that picture as opposed to the next one is very different.
Maybe another sensor can pick that up.
As in higher or lower, better, worse, or just different?
Different.
These are at random now.
Whoops.
Another picture of the magnetron,
Okay.
I mean the
There's gonna be a lot of
amplitron.
those.
Yeah, I know, Jan
So
took
I'm
loads
just-
of those.
just Do what you want. See if there's
Same
anything
thing.
different.
Same thing, go on. Go on.
He's going as fast as he can.
Preston, he's got it loaded
I know.
awfully.
That's another
If
shot of
there's
the
any
power
more welding
transformer.
shots that you see.
Look at those insulators.
No.
Oh, God.
Big?
Well, this thing provided 20 kV. Another shot, that's the same thing, go on.
There's the torch marks, which are not as clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
same thing, go on. You say there's lots of those.
Okay. It's gonna jump outside.
Okay, this is a closer shot of the antenna, but not close enough. You can see all the cables going into this
Yeah.
box on the bottom. They were doing phased array work with this thing. You see cables running up it. These were driving. This is a series of dipoles. He's got a close-up of this somewhere in there.
This is Over the Horizon radar,
Yes,
isn't
it is. That doesn't matter. That's all fuzzed out. I guess you also picked up the bad ones.
Well, I told you I took them out, but you wanted to see those. So.
Same thing. Keep going. Look, we can run them quick.
The best I can.
Yep. That's a dud.
Yeah, back inside.
This is better than walking through the place.
It's better.
That's a burning?
Yeah, it's the burning.
Outside again, is that right? Or-
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. That's
right.
the gain horn.
And these are of no value to them now, to use somewhere else.
Well, I'm sure they're valued.
Sure they are.
just
Oh,
don't
Of course, more
need
to
it.
transport than.
No, then build it,
Right.
besides, put somebody back in business, right?
That's the cop's car.
Did you come out and see what you were doing?
Yeah. Cop came in and looked in every couple of hours.
Really?
It's a shot of the whole town, like. That's Fort Hero right
That's a
there.
nice,
We had a permit to get in there.
Yeah.
A day permit.
Another shot of the antenna. Let's keep
How
going.
difficult is it to get a permit?
Very.
How'd you
The
manage?
fellow got it through the alleged connection to the senator. Continue. That's another amplitron.
A few more here.
Another one continue. You can tell when they left, they took off in a hurry. You can see this junk strewn everywhere. The military doesn't leave it like this.
How many of those tubes were there?
2.
Two.
what did they, yeah, I got the.
You
they were
can
used to
continue.
drive
That's the
them.
same thing. It's another shot.
That's welding torch up there?
Yeah. There's 2 big ones. Big
Well,
one here.
what
You
would you-
notice they're always where this would turn and go up.
What were they cutting at? Was there something coming out of the wall?
Waveguide.
Yes,
What?
the waveguide went up like this. So this thing was quite
I
disassembled.
wouldn't cut that thing running with, I wouldn't want an open waveguide.
I wouldn't either. I
I
wouldn't.
Ooh.
Another shot of the tube. I can assure you, I didn't cut it apart. Another shot of the tube, big
They
deal.
probably ordered some private to do it who didn't know what
What
was
if
going
things
on.
like this
No, Pruitt
cost?
himself did. Huh?
Cut
Who
that
did?
off.
Pruitt himself did
Did
that?
Pruitt himself cut it apart.
Jeez, he must have been desperate.
What would a tube like this cost?
This is
Probably
a
one.
C23J, which today is about $4,500. Another shot of the Amplatron.
The Ampetrons were a little more expensive.
Yes. The Amplatron is worth about $250,000.
Each one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another shot of the Amplatron. We can go on.
Much more. An Amplatron here.
Even had a built-in vacuum pump, which you can see here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
Magnet.
That's it.
Hmm?
Okay.
Okay.
Start up on this.
Now we're gonna get into the next.
Pull the chair back in here somewhere.
Now we go on to the Philadelphia experiment,
Right.
otherwise known as nonsense at sea.
Earlier project which started this whole business off, so far as I can determine, that was the infamous Philadelphia experiment, so-called because in its final phases was conducted in the harbor outside the city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It originally began back, I'll condense this quite a bit, it originally began back in the 30s in Chicago with three people, Dr. John Hutchinson Sr., who was the dean of the University of Chicago, Nikola Tesla, and a third man by the name of Dr. Kurtenauer, who was an Austrian physicist who was apparently on staff at the University of Chicago. They decided about that time to try and do something about all of the speculation rampant at that time and for years prior about things like invisibility and how could you possibly make an object invisible and so on. They got together and researched the thing and did some work at the University of Chicago around 31, 32. In 33, the Institute of Advanced Studies at Princeton, New Jersey was formed. And the project was transferred there probably about 34. Now, one of the first people on staff at the University Institute of Advanced Studies was Dr. John Eric von Neumann, who was from Hungary, Budapest. He had his degree about 1925 in chemistry and 26 in physics, PhD in math. Taught in Europe for about 4 years, then transferred to the United States. He taught at the graduate school at Princeton for 3 years and was invited to join the Institute. Other people at the Institute, of course, included Albert Einstein, who left Germany in 1930, went to the California Institute of Technology for 3 years, taught there, then went to the Institute upon their invitation and acceptance. A lot of other people showed up there as time went on. But the project expanded about 1936. In the meantime, of course, Tesla was named as director of the project because he was a very good friend of a certain gentleman in the White House known as Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who he had originally met in 1917 when Roosevelt was the Secretary of the Navy, and Tesla was asked at that time to do some work for the government, for the war effort, which he did. And they maintained their friendship. When he became president, Roosevelt, insofar as I can determine, called him down to Washington and asked him, well, how would you like to work for the government again? And since he was not terribly flush with money at that time, namely Tesla wasn't, he accepted, became involved with this project insofar as being the director was concerned. He had already been involved. And he became and retained his position as director of the so-called Invisibility Project until he resigned or left, however it occurred in 1942. 1936, with their studies in the labs there, they decided to have some kind of an early test. They had partial results, which means they had partial invisibility. The Navy was encouraged, everybody was encouraged to continue. And of course the Navy had been funding it almost from the beginning in terms of doing things like giving them a little research money and grants and that sort of thing. It progressed onward until 1940, and I'll get a little bit out of sequence here, but in 1940, after further research and with Tesla's approach, they decided they were ready for a full test. They had a small Navy ship, probably a tender, and two adjacent vehicles, Brooklyn Navy Yard, and the two adjacent vehicles provided the power and the basic drives for the coils and the equipment they had on board the tender, with cables from either side, and the idea being if they're in the area of the Brooklyn Navy Yard with the cables, if something went wrong, they could cut the cables, and if they got desperate, they could sink the ship. Well, nothing of the kind happened. Everything worked, and the project was declared completely successful. But the important point of that 1940 test was there was no one on board the test vehicle. It was strictly a dry run, no people, no personnel. It's important because of what happened later. Now, in the meantime, other people came on board. There was a Dr. Gustav Le Bon, an associate of Van Neumann's, who became a close associate. There was a Dr. Clarkson, came in about 1940. Additionally, also came a T. Townsend Brown, who had had a strange history I won't go into. But he was joined the Naval Reserve about 1933, and about 1939 he was tapped on the shoulder for active service by the Navy, and they wanted him specifically because of his background in gravity, gravitics, high voltage and such, to work on the problem of the German magnetic mines. He was given the status of the head of a department to develop countermeasures for the German magnetic mines and other mines, minesweeper operations for the Navy. That became important because this led into a parallel project, the degaussing project of the Navy, where they developed the so-called degaussing cables to explode the magnetic mines at a distance quite safe, quite far away from the ship. Normally they'd be triggered by the magnetic flux of the ship's general mass, which would concentrate flux lines at a certain point that would trip the mechanism, and of course, ideally the magnetic mine would be tripped under the hull and of course blow the ship to kingdom come. If you provided a strong, powerful magnetic field, it would trip the mine's sensing mechanisms at a safe distance and would be harmlessly exploded. That project was actually separate from the invisibility project, but was also parallel in the sense that much of the same technology was involved. Now, I became involved with this thing. I'll have to go into a little bit of a personal history. We'll again try to condense it because we are, I think, running a little late, but whatever. Quite aside from my legal name, which is on my birth certificate of Bielek, I was born in 1916, the best that I've been able to determine from my own memories and what comes up, 4 August 1916. I was born Edward A. Cameron, and in 1917, I believe 15 May, this guy was born in his original body, Duncan Cameron, or whatever they called him at the time. And we were born into a family with considerable amounts of money, not really wealthy, but they were well off. And we didn't hurt for money, we didn't hurt for the means for an education. It came time we went to school. He wound up in the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, according to his readings. Took a PhD in physics in 1939. I, in the meantime, went to University of Princeton, bachelor's and master's degree, and so far as I can determine, again, from memories, took a PhD in physics from Harvard in 1939, both of us in the summer. It was arranged by our inimitable father, who had a great deal of influence with the Navy and apparently political clout in various sections and parts of the government. We do not understand how he got these connections. We don't know anything about them. There are no documents to show this. He himself served in the Navy in World War I, apparently as an ordinary recruit, did a 20-year stint, retired. At what status, we don't know. Again, the retirement papers are missing, the separation papers. We do not know whether he got involved in intelligence or not, but it would appear that he did because of its subsequent events. He didn't work, from everything we know, from that point on. He had money from the family, and he became an ardent admirer of sailboats and decided to build his own. He built one, raced it, took some trophies, would sell it and build another. In between, he was traveling back and forth to Europe, and as had been previously mentioned, he became involved in the smuggling of German scientists Jewish scientists out of Nazi Germany into the U.S. This ceased in 1939 when the Cold War turned to a hot war. But he had connections. We don't know how they were obtained, where they went, but it was determined that the two of us would become part of this project. When we finished our education, we were invited to join and to enlist in the Navy. We were both given commissions, September 1939. And we then did about 3 months at Provincetown, Rhode Island Academy for the naval officers. In those days, they did the so-called 90-day wonder business. But we were already fairly well prepared. We didn't go through Annapolis or anything like this. And then we were sent to the project. We were there in 39 up until, for a period in 39, then through 1940. At the time of the test in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, we were on board at the Princeton Institute of Advanced Studies, and we also had, at that time, officers in the Philadelphia Navy Yard, which again became rather important later. But we did a lot of shuttling back and forth as part of our job. And one of the reasons why we were chosen was that the Navy wanted two people to represent their interests and keep full tabs on what was going on in the tests and the development of the program, who were technically competent to report in detail what was going on and to report to the Navy in the appropriate reports which they required, exactly what was happening in our technical commentaries. And that's why the education. There's also another aspect of this involved, that aside from Tesla, who did not have a good formal education, he started out, but in 1979 his father died, and his first year in the university was terminated, and he had to go to work. He came to the U.S. in '84. He had an enormous insight and an incredible intuitive insight, and solved his problems in that manner very competently. He had a perfect track record. But unlike he, Van Neumann had a PhD in math, and his mathematical background was in the turn of this century. And before he came to the United States, he met a number of other people. J. Robert Oppenheimer was in Germany at that time. He became important because at a later time Oppenheimer was involved with the atomic bomb project, but not with the invisibility program. Additionally, he met Dr. David, what was the mathematician's name? Hilbert, who was a genius of a mathematician. He developed all kinds of new math. He was essentially contemporary with Van Neumann, who was born in 1905. Hilbert was born about 1912. And he had a PhD in math, but he developed whole new systems of math, about 5 different varieties, the most important of which, and for which he was well known, was the so-called Hilbert space. And this was a new means of describing mathematically multiple realities, multiple space, which became very important to the project. Van Neumann met him about 1925, 27, in that period, and took a lot of Hilbert's work and ran with it, and Van Neumann in turn developed all kinds of new systems of mathematics of his own. He was also known as a real genius of a mathematician. He was considered probably the most outstanding mathematician of this century. You know, some people think he was better than Einstein. Of course, others don't agree. But he developed many systems of his own which became important. There was another man who was also very important as a mathematician, of which there was virtually no traceability at this time. He was an American by the name of Levinson, Dr. Levinson, born 1912, died, so far as I can determine, 1976. He's published 3 books on very involved mathematics. I finally was able to hold in my hands 2 of those 3 books. I found them very recently at the Institute of Advanced Studies Library in Princeton. Never been able to find them anywhere else, but no history of Levinson himself. And he developed what was even more important, the so-called Levinson time equations. With that as a background, they were able then to go on and develop the whole system of the invisibility project as applied to a large hard object. Now in 1940, as I said, the test was successful. The Navy then decided they would go full bore, finance the thing with unlimited funds, and classify the project, of course. And we were part of it. Well, in 1941, the project was going on, and of course Tesla had full-bore enthusiasm from the Navy, and they had full confidence from the President and everybody else to go ahead. While we were at sea, because they decided the 2 of us needed some sea duty, so we spent a year, 1941, at sea, in the USS Pennsylvania, as I remember. which toured the Pacific. It came back to Pearl Harbor for some repairs and dry docking in October of 41. We took some leave. We went to San Francisco. The 5th of December, we were about to board the plane back to Pearl when we were stopped by a captain who was just getting on the plane. He said, "Gentlemen, your orders are canceled. Come with me." So we went Vice Admiral Hal Bowen Sr., who was the then director of the Office of Naval Engineering, which was abolished in 46, but he was in charge of all of the research work for the Navy. And he told us, "Gentlemen, you may as well know, we will be at war with Japan within 48 to 72 hours. We expect to hit Pearl Harbor. You're not going back there. You're too valuable. So we're going to leave you in San Francisco until your tour is over, which is the home base for the Pennsylvania. You'll do office work. You can enjoy some leave time." He says, "You might as well enjoy it, because when you go back to the Institute, there will be no leaves and there will be nothing but hard work." So we did. January 42, we went back to the Institute and remained there through the whole series of tests and the whole project. In the meantime, Tesla was given a ship for his full-size tests with crew. And that happened to be a battleship, unknown. But in wartime, apparently, politics has a bit of pull, and the politics coming from the President of the United States, he could probably order the Secretary of the Navy to supply any kind of ship that Tesla wanted. So he got a battleship. The equipment was designed, of course, by Tesla with a lot of work and cooperation, and you might say also a lot of fighting between Tesla and Van Neumann. Tesla was director, Van Neumann was, I guess, assistant. They didn't agree on everything. Van Neumann had a great deal of respect for Tesla's ability, but they didn't agree about everything. Tesla was insisting, as the date approached for the tests on the battleship with personnel, that they were going to have a very severe problem with personnel. He said flatly, he says, "You cannot employ the large amounts of power required to make a ship of this size invisible without having a very disastrous effect on the heads of the people, or the minds, or the bodies of the personnel involved, because you're talking megawatts of RF power, enormous amounts of power, and the coils, which in the early phases were like degaussing coils, were wrapped around the hull of the ship, but the later design was a set of 4 coils mounted on the deck of the ship, specially designed Tesla conical shaped designs. And just interestingly enough, every transformer design ever built by Nikola Tesla was conical, was not round core, it was conically shaped, tapering towards a point at the top. Well, he knew he had a problem, Tesla. He went to the Navy, asked for more time, they wouldn't give him more time. He says, "You have a deadline." And he had already been advised, and here we have to backtrack a little bit into the history of Tesla. By his own statements to the press in 1900 in Colorado Springs, he said he was in contact with intelligences from off the planet Earth, very coolly received by his scientific colleagues. He made the same announcement to the press in 1923 at the time of the Mars approach, the close approach in 23, and he made another announcement after that. And according to 2 people I know personally who worked with Tesla in the period in the late 30s and the early 40s, he had a great deal of RF equipment in his New York labs. He had 2 of them, actually. His residence at the Hotel New Yorker and a receiving station there. And he also had lab offices and the lab operation in the top towers and the top floor of the Waldorf Astoria, and those transmitters were located there. At least one of these 2 people said he was in contact with somebody off-planet nearly every day. He says, "I didn't understand the equipment." He says, "I know he was." The inference here, and the data I have, is that he was in contact with the outside, and he was getting information which says, "You've got a very serious problem. You've got to solve it or you're going to lose people. They'll be dead." And so he went, based on this, to the Navy. The Navy would not give him additional time. He says, "I know how to solve the problem," but he says, "I need more time to design new equipment." The Navy says, "There's a war on. You can just make it work. Don't change anything. Make it work. You got a deadline." So he took the only way out he knew, and that was to sabotage the project for the test which came up in March 42. So he just detuned the equipment, so when the switches were thrown, nothing worked. I mean, the transmitters lit, the tubes came alive, and power was consumed, but nothing worked. No field effects, no invisibility. So he says, "Well, gentlemen, I guess I goofed, and it's time to leave. You have a very good man here who can take over the project, Dr. Van Neumann. I'm leaving. Bye." It's debatable whether he left or was fired, or whether they said, you were fired, and he said, you can't fire me, I quit. In any case, he left. And that was the end of Tesla insofar as that project was concerned.
What year was that?
That was 1942, March. Van Neumann took over and he looked at everything. He said to the Navy, he says, I got to make a study of this. It obviously failed. He says, I don't know what's wrong, but I'll find out. He says, I need time. And the Navy couldn't say anything. He said, give him the time. So he went ahead. We were working with him at that time. We were back and forth between the Philadelphia Navy Yard office and, of course, the Institute. I don't know where we spent more time, probably at the Institute. So Van Neumann made his own study of it and decided to change things around, and they still had the 2 generators that he proposed to use. In the meantime, he didn't have the battleship. It was a ship of the line that went back in service. It did not have a special crew. It had the regular crew. And they finally decided, he, of course, talking through us to the Navy brass, we needed a special ship that would be outfitted from the ground up. So it was decided to pick one that was going to come down the ways, and they decided on DE-173, which later was named the Eldridge. And about July of 42, they were laying the keel, and it was designed, the design was modified so they could put in 2 huge generators. And the reason why they had to design the equipment to the ship was the fact that a destroyer escort is not a very large ship. It's about 1,500 tons, roughly equipped. The later figure said 1,900. Dry weight was agreement between both the Greek records and the American records of 1,240 tons dry. It's a rather small destroyer. It only had 2 gun turrets. So to fit 2 huge generators and the motor drive system and all the RF equipment and the 4 transmitters on this thing, it took a lot of design effort, actually, from the beginning to know where you're going to fit the stuff. You don't throw it on this ship in midstream after it's built. So October it came down the ways, and they wanted to dry dock, put equipment on board, and before they did this, they decided they needed a special test crew. Selected about 33 people, all volunteers, trained them up at Groton, Connecticut, from about September to December of 42, and they graduated, and the picture still exists at the graduation class. And who was the head of the class but our father? This picture there with the naval uniform and the cap and scrambled eggs and the whole bit. Still don't know how he got involved in this, but he could have transferred between the Navy and the Coast Guard, because there is a letter of citation still on the records, which Duncan has had, I believe, I don't know if you think he still has it, I've seen it, a letter of citation from the Coast Guard for assistance during the wartime period, meritorious assistance for during the war for the Coast Guard, etc., etc. And this was the Coast Guard Academy at Groton where this crew was trained. So they came back to Philadelphia, and the work continued. The equipment was outfitted, and they started after the ship was not seaworthy, but actually out of dry dock, sitting at the dockside of the Philadelphia Naval Yard. A long series of tests began, a lot of modification equipment. Along about March of 42, Van Neumann started to shake a little and became concerned that maybe there's a personnel problem. He started to agree with it because Duncan and myself were both pounding on him, saying, there's going to be a personal problem. You can't turn the switch on. You're going to possibly kill people. Tesla said so. Well, the mention of Tesla's name, he got very upset. He would fly into a rage, eventually got over it. But he agreed, yeah, maybe there is a problem. What do we do about it? He decided to put in a 3rd generator and modify the system, and at that point he still had time to do it. So he ordered and had installed a 3rd generator along about May of 43, and it never worked right. It wouldn't sync with the other 2. The other 2 generators, I might add, were driven off a single motor and a gearbox, right-angle gearbox drive with special electronics to synchronize the generators, because with a motor of about 750 horsepower and a gigantic gearbox is required, those gearboxes were sloppy. You could not mechanically synchronize the generators. They had to be an absolute electrical sync, so that was accomplished by other synchronizing means with special cabinets. And there's another man whom I know of who designed that equipment. And he's still alive, too. Anyway, the 3rd generator never worked right. Finally, it went out of control one day and zapped one of the individuals who was assigned to us as a technician, a Navy man, first-class specialist. He was laid out completely unconscious in a coma. They hauled him off to the hospital. He recovered 4 months later, was never part of the project. So Van Neumann finally said, All right, nothing's no good. Pull it out. Back to the original design. On this went. Finally had the sea trial for the ship about mid-June. July 1, they decided to go into the final series of tests and preparation. So about July 20th of 43, they decided, well, I guess it's ready. Going to make our tests. So they decided 22 July, got the whole crew together, selected about 12 individuals plus the two of us who were in the control room to operate all the equipment. There was another man who was a radio operator who is, I believe, still alive today. I've not been able to talk with him. So the fateful hour came. They ran the ship out into the harbor, stopped the engines. They did not drop anchor because it had to be floating free as it would be normally in service, and they could not ground the ship with the anchors. So it came to a stop. The orders came via radio, fire up and go through the procedures, in which we did. The ship became invisible optically as well as radar. And this lasted about 15-20 minutes. They finally said, okay, shut it off. Bring the ship back to dock, to the dockside berth, which was done by the crew. They boarded it to expect it, and they found out there were problems. So a lot of people on that ship who were thoroughly disoriented, sick, nauseous, and otherwise not with it. No one was dead, no one was injured as such physically, but the mind effects were severe, both physiological and psychological. Navy said, okay, pull the crew off. What's wrong? Back to Dr. Van Neumann. He says, I don't know, I've got to find out. So he started looking into this, and he finally decided he needed more time to study it. And he said to the Navy, he says, this is going to take more time to look at. And he says, you have a drop-dead deadline of the 12th of August, 1943 to get this experiment completed, otherwise forget it. And he says, that isn't enough time. He says, that's your deadline. Well, we heard that. I am Duncan, or particularly I went to we went up the line. We went to Hal Bowen and said, what's this all about? He says, that's the orders I was given. He says, where did they come from? He says, I don't know, but I'll find out. We went all the way up to the CNO, which didn't make sense because the Chief of Naval Operations normally doesn't concern himself with that kind of detail in a research program. He's concerned with the operation of the war. But of course, at the same time, there was the other project called the Atomic Bomb Project, Manhattan Project, as it was known then, which was vying with this as the secret weapon for the war. So as things went on, there were night and day operations to get this equipment in order. Van Neumann made changes because the Navy finally decided they don't want optical invisibility, they don't want radar invisibility only. At that time, we didn't have inertial guidance systems. We didn't have lower and shore and worldwide. And of course, if you didn't have radar to see where an adjacent ship was, you better be able to see it physically. Otherwise, in the fleet, you might ram each other at sea at night. So that was the orders. He modified the equipment. On the 12th of August, rather shaking as we went out into our station, we knew things were wrong. And well, we followed orders. The orders were, at the appropriate time, turn on the equipment, which we did. For about 60 or 70 seconds, everything looked good. They got the radar invisibility. The ship outline could be seen hazily. It was still more or less visible. And then, as memory serves, and as the observers said later, there was a flash of light, blue flash, and the ship just disappeared. Wasn't seen anymore, no outline in the water, no hull, nothing. No radio communication, gone for about 3 hours. And it came back. They knew immediately something was wrong because one of the masts, the principal radio mast, which had been designed by T. Townsend Brown, along with some of the transmitter equipment and modifications, was broken. There was some superstructure damage, and they couldn't get any radio communications, and they couldn't get the ship to maneuver, so they went out and boarded it, and that's when they found the real extent of the problem. There were 4 men embedded in the decks, 2 in the steel decks on top, 2 on the bulkhead walls, and the 5th man had his hand jammed in the steel of the wall. He lived because they could cut his hand off and give him an artificial hand. People disoriented. Reports were some were floating around and finally got their feet on the ground. Others floated away and disappeared. The crew on the second test was a little larger than the first. And a number who were just plain totally insane. So the Navy Say, get that ship back in here, get the crew off. They held 4 days worth of meetings. What's wrong? What do we do now? And this, of course, involved all the top brass, plus Van Neumann, plus the scientists. They couldn't come to any real conclusions as to what was wrong or what to do. And eventually decided there would be one more test on the Eldridge, and there would be a dry run again like the original one. No personnel. Rebuilt the equipment. They would run it by remote cables, about 1,000 foot of cable from the adjacent ship.
No generators on the ship itself?
Everything on the ship as it was originally for the second test.
Okay.
But they would use the crew to take it out into the outer harbor at night and then remove the crew and control the equipment remotely, which they did in late October. And same results in essence, but no crew to be damaged. The ship disappeared for about 20 minutes, came back. A lot of equipment was missing, 2 transmitter cabinets, 1 generator. Everything in the control room was a burned out shambles, even though nobody was there. The 1 cabinet with the 0 time reference generator was still intact. The Navy at that point just said, that's it, and wipe our hands of it, strip the ship, re-outfit it so it can go to sea, and of course it already had been christened and properly commissioned with its regular officer, which is of record, and sometime in the fall it was ready and went to sea, and the log, which was later recovered by the Greeks after the war was over, and the Eldridge, which had gone into mothballs in 1946 and was transferred to the Greek Navy in 51, the log had all of the pages missing prior to January 144. So the problem, and the question was, what really happened? What went wrong? Now this is where, at that time, we didn't know what was going on. But that is, after the first test, we didn't see anything wrong. After the second test, we knew what was going on. That is, he and I did, because what happened was very, very bizarre. The ship disappeared into hyperspace. And the important point was, there was another experiment going on at the same time, and that was the Phoenix Project, which 12 August 1983 was exactly 40 years to the day later. And what's important about this is the fact that it was a 40-year separation exactly, actually a multiple of 20 years. Work done since then, or perhaps during that period and ongoing, has shown that, like humans who have a biorhythm, the Earth has a biorhythm. And the Earth's biorhythms peak out, 4 of them, 20 years to the day, plus or minus maybe half a day, every 20 years on August 12th, 1943, 63, 83, 2003, whatever. And it just happened to peak, or shall we say, maybe it just happened, maybe it was arranged this way. The August test in 43, August 12th, coincided with the station running August 12th, 83, and provided an additional function which provided the connecting link through the Earth's fields for the 2 experiments to lock up in hyperspace. The ship was pulled into hyperspace completely. And the only way it could be returned was we decided, he and I, we couldn't control the ship. We knew something was drastically wrong. We tried to shut the equipment off and we could not. We tried pulling handles and everything. Nothing would yield. We just got half electrocuted. We finally decided, let's get out of here. Well, where do we go? We jump over the side and land in the bay, get away from this thing. Well, we jumped overboard and we didn't land in the bay. We wound up through a time tunnel and wound up standing on dry ground at Montauk in 1983, August 12th at night. And of course we were found very quickly. We were taken downstairs. Van Neumann greeted us.
He knew you.
Well, of course he knew us. He knew we were coming. The thing was a bit of a shock because here we were just working with Van Neumann 43, who was a young man essentially, and here we see Van Neumann 83, an old man, who knew we were coming, knew what it was all about, and said, gentlemen, we have a problem. He says, we have a lockup through hyperspace. And I said, we knew this was going to happen because I've had the records. He said, I've lived with this 40 years waiting for this day, so to speak. He says, we can't shut this thing down because the Eldridge is the source of the power running this thing from the other end. It's in hyperspace. It says, you guys have to go back and shut the thing off. He says, we know you did. The records say so. Which, of course, you haven't done it yet, but you're going to have to go back and shut it off. So he says, if you shut it off any way you can, destroy it physically if you have to, which is, of course, what we did. We went back to the Eldridge, They had, of course, the time capability to send us back directly to that spot and location, quite aside from the movie and what it said. We went back, we took out the axes, and we just started cutting cables right and left till the generators shut down and the equipment was off. We smashed tube banks, we smashed equipment, we cut cables, we cut everything in sight. Generators went down, the ship returned to its original point in space and time about 3 hours later. And of course, the Navy found what was there. I remained with the ship, he went back to 83. Begins another part of the story, but from that point on, 43 on, Van Neumann in 43 didn't know what had happened except what I told him. He didn't believe it. But he had equipment which enabled myself to go back and forth between 43 and 83. He had another set of equipment in the labs, which actually was the early equipment, which was the prototype. And he had modified it, which the Navy didn't know at that time, to be a full-blown time travel machine.
In 43.
In 43, correct. See, the Germans also were working on the time travel project, and they had it working in 45, just before the war ended in Germany. This is also a matter of record. So, in any case, trips were made back and forth. He was finally convinced, and it was too late to do anything about the experiment in the second phase. But after the Navy decided to shut the whole thing down, of course, he was removed from the project to go work in the atomic bomb project at Los Alamos until that was over. So in 47, getting a little out of sequence, but nevertheless we try to present this in a logical sequence rather than the exact time sequence. In 47, there was major changes in the Defense Department. You had the Department of the Air Force created. The Navy's function was somewhat altered. The Army was altered. The Department of Defense was set up at the Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs, all of this. And somebody, after Hal Bowen was retired, in the new structure of the Navy with the Department or Office of Naval Research said, well, let's go back and find out what the blazes really happened with the Eldridge and this whole project. The war is over. We haven't got anything else to do. Let's see if we can find out what it was about and maybe salvage something out of this if it's possible. So they said to Van Neumann, go take another look at this thing. You've got all the time you want. There's no war on. Take your time. Be thorough. What happened? What went wrong? What do we do about it, if anything? So he says, all right. Now, I will take a look at it. Now, a number of things happened. I did not know about the UFO connection until fairly recently. But to go back to 43, about 6 days before the final test, which is to say early August, 3 UFOs appeared over the Eldridge. They were seen, they were noted. And when the final test began, 2 of them left the area, a third disappeared. One of the UFOs was sucked up along with the Eldridge into hyperspace, and it wound up in Montauk in the underground. Now, that's interesting because of what turns out in the records since, which come out of Canada. I'll go into that last. But Van Neumann, looking at this, realized there was a human equation he didn't understand. And he was not a metaphysician. He had no occult training. He was a hard-headed mathematician, typical German school type thing, and nuts and bolts engineer at the same time. And he probably was scratching his head. What the blazes was going on here? Well, about 47, when he was asked to look into this, shortly after that, he was also, because he still had offices probably at Los Alamos, he was called out by the government to partake in the examination of a crashed UFO at Aztec, New Mexico. He was part of the research team there, looking into this. So here he sees evidence of life from another planet, from another system perhaps, dead aliens and all of this sort of thing. What does this mean? Well, another one occurred approximately a year later, again at Aztec, and then there was another one at Roswell later, but the second one at Aztec that came down, the first one apparently had some of the little grays, as they've become to be known since, all dead. The second one that came down had at least one live occupant
Did
still
they
in
come
it.
down in the same place? Or
In New
different
Mexico, in
areas
the same
Aztec?
general area of Aztec, yes. The reason being that, from what we can learn now, is our radar systems were affecting their drives. And when it was found out that we could do it, apparently some of the people in the government started doing this deliberately. We're not sure that that's exactly what happened.
Did they
in
both come
47.
down on that plateau in Aztec? Or
Yeah,
did
they came down in the same general area, apparently because of a radar system not too far away.
Right.
So the second one crashed, but it had a survivor on it. And apparently this one was not with the same group. And when Neumann got to talk with this one, and he told him all about his problem, Van Neumann's problem with the whole experiment. And he said, I'll give you some clues as to how you're going to have to solve it. He said, you're going to have to solve it. So how the communication was set up, I don't know, but Van Neumann got his clue from that. He was badly shaken. He learned enough that he had to go back and start from page 1 and learn his metaphysics, his occult theory, everything regarding the human psyche. And he was told this, apparently. And I'm speculating in part. But he learned that he had to go back and do his homework on metaphysics. When he did this, he found out what the real nature of the problem was. And the real nature of the problem is esoteric, but it's also very real. First of all, the ship, in order to partake of this experiment, in order to create these fields, you were actually doing a rotation of the space-time fields. And you can only do this if you have the equipment to generate these fields, and you can only generate them if you have a zero-time reference. None of the energies can be created and synchronized without a zero-time reference generator, and that was the first thing they had to have, and that was developed by Tesla in the 20s. Now, the ship had a zero-time reference. The ship was locked to this thing with the fields because the fields surrounded the ship. So there's no problem. The ship was locked to this, and when the thing came down, the zero-time reference brought everything back to the same point. But humans also have a time reference. Now, they're not locked as to a zero-time reference. They're locked to the point of conception. Every individual who is conceived and then goes on through the gestation period and is born is locked to the time stream, as we call it, and is locked to it so that he can relate to the society and the civilization around him and flows at the same rate as everyone else and has a reference. That reference remains throughout his life until he or she dies, at which point the soul goes onward and it can come back and reincarnate either, theoretically, either past or future. But these time references are somewhat fragile. When you start pumping megawatts of power and actually pulse to into the gigawatt region of the type of energies which will affect the mind and the psyche and the spirit, you disrupt these references. So what happens? The references for the individuals were disrupted. They are still within the ship's field, so they are not lost. They don't float off into space at that point. But when the ship's fields come down, if those individuals' references are knocked loose, as everyone on deck was, and those below, behind the steel barriers, so to speak, which are shields against both the RF and magnetic energies, they were not affected, and we weren't because of that. And it's not an instantaneous effect either. Those who were floating on the decks lost their references, so when the ship came back to its normal space-time, the individuals didn't float back in the exact same reference. They could have been anywheres. If they happened to be in the space where the ship materialized a steel deck or a steel bulkhead, then the steel of that bulkhead was in their bodies as the body finally rematerialized. If they floated off into space, they floated off into space and didn't come back at all. So that was the problem which Van Neumann faced. How do you lock the time references for the individuals to the whole system, the ship's references? How precisely he solved that, I don't know, but he did know that he had to use a computer to synchronize the whole business. He had to find a means to lock the individuals in. This required some knowledge of metaphysics, and it also required a computer, which did not exist at that time. So he went and developed a computer in the labs at the Institute. The first modern electronic computer was developed by Van Neumann in 1950, and the first full working model was 52. And they developed a model. Apparently it went to the Navy with a whole new system. In 53 they performed a test with another ship, name unknown, which was totally successful. And the individuals did not go wandering off into space. They didn't perish, they didn't get violent, they didn't become nauseous. Everything was normal the way they wanted it. So what happens? The Navy says, we finally got it. They canceled Project Rainbow, which was the name for the project from 1940 on, and it became Project Phoenix. So this became, in part, Project Phoenix P1, and it also went into P2. But this is where the Philadelphia experiment, Project Rainbow, became part of P1, and became parallel with certain other work going on at Brookhaven. Now, one of the problems, of course, that developed, and the thing that the Navy had to look at, was what happened to the personnel. There were a number of medical reports, and I know of these because I personally talked with George Hoover, who was part of the investigative team with the Office of Naval Research in the 50s, when the whole matter was reopened with Mark K. Jessup, who wrote the book, The Case for the UFO, and this famous annotated book arrived in, I think it was Admiral Firth's office in 1955, and circulated through the Navy Department, the Office of Naval Research. And Jessup was called on. I says, "What do you know about this?" He says, "Nothing." He says, "What are all these footnotes?" He says, "I have no idea."
It was Allende notes?
This was the Allende business, right. Carlos Miguel Allende, and here's in the footnotes and the letters which later went to Jessup. And Hoover became thoroughly interested in the whole business. He set up the whole team to research the business, and he went back into the records. And he told me when I talked with him on the phone about 2 months or so ago, as I found out where he was, and he's retired, and he said, "Yeah," he said, "there was a medical report, and there was a final report." And he says the medical report was the most interesting one of all, because he said this indicated that the Navy was confronted with a totally new and unique situation, very high-powered equipment affecting the minds and the physiology of sailors and men, which they had never had any experience with before. And he says a lot came out of that. Well, no, a lot did, but he didn't talk about what came out of it. Out of that came work which led to the mind research programs later, and all of the other things which expanded from P1 on. And they also found that certain aspects of the whole Philadelphia experiment and restudy involved mind potentialities for mind control, certain other things which they noted where some of these people faded out of our reality and then would fade back in a totally involuntary manner. Very strange phenomena, but all of this became part of a larger research program later. So the thing was salvaged in that sense. It also went on and became the basis as expanded for the development into the stealth program and a lot of other programs which are very sensitive and we'll go into. But what happened to us? Well, in 47, the Navy decided they didn't want me around anymore, or somebody decided they didn't want me around anymore, and I suddenly disappeared one day, according to one Navy man who's still alive, who was in that period. And I wound up in 83. And in the interim, now it becomes very difficult to understand at this point. Here I was in 83, just sent there from 47. I was already there in 83 working on the Phoenix project because of another huge time loop. He was there working on the project in 83, and he was also there because of the Philadelphia experiment. So they had to take great pains to keep myself and myself apart, if you understand what I'm saying, and himself apart. Because of two people running through a time loop, the same person, absolutely, through a time loop, meet each other, it's a disaster. So they took a great deal of trouble to keep us apart. But in any case, they sent me to 83. They decided on how they're going to handle the project. They wanted to bury me and anyone else that had any connection with the Philadelphia experiment, totally brainwash the individuals, and wipe out all memory of the experiment and anything connected with it. So they did that to me, and in the meantime they had also developed some other hardware which was known as the age regression techniques. Now this also goes back to Tesla. His last project before he died, if he died, in 43, was again communicating with his ET friends. They had told him how to solve the problem. He went on and developed a system for what he thought would resolve the problem of the sailors or anyone on board these ships after the experiment, if they had lost their time locks, to reestablish them in another point, possibly, where it would be more stable. The government took this and developed it into another program, which was known later as the age regression business, meaning physical age regression, i.e. you could take a person who was age 60 and reduce him by this technique and this program to physically age 20, put him back to where he was at the age 20 physically, but not mentally. He would maintain his abilities, his ideas, his thoughts, his memory, his entire lifetime of experience, just that the body would be reduced in age. The theory on this and how the government handled it, we don't know, but the theory that Tesla worked on, we understand, was that if you take these time locks for the individual and move them forward in time, you are in effect removing X number of years of age. If you push them ahead 20 years, the body will act eventually, because of the shift of the time references, like it is 20 years younger, and will physically reverse itself in age and go to the reference of those locks. So that it will, within about 30 to 60 days, we're not sure how long, the body will just get younger. So what they did with me is they decided, well, we'll do a new one on him. We'll take him from age 31, which I was at that time in 47. Just run him back to the age 1 and plug him in another family, and they picked the year 1927. Apparently it was astrologically chosen, because I can go into a long story on this, but plugged me into the Bielek family. The kid who was born to them apparently developed some problems. Whether they were genuine or whether they were feigned, I don't know, but the story was the kid was very ill and went to the hospital and died, and I was put in as a substitute and fitted in terms of a, well, what's a 6 months or 1 year old kid? One kid at that age looks just about like another. If you select them properly, you can hardly tell the difference. The mother may know the difference. And as it turned out, in my case, my legal mother, before she died, about 4 months, she came up one day in the nursing home with a memory. She looked at me very blankly, like I was somebody else, came out with this, I'll never forget, she said, "The baby's dead, isn't it?" And I knew then that she knew, and had buried for years a memory of what had happened, because a substitution was made and she knew it, but she chose to forget it. There was only one child in the family, and that was me. There were no brothers or sisters. So I had a good part of my answer. I also know that I can regress all the way back in my time age sequence to 6 months, and then there's a total blank. And then there was a means by which I seemed to remember being born, which was actually the other kid, and I was interlocked for years with the other kid's cross-coupling of the lattices, which was another very exotic technique they used. They wanted to make sure I wouldn't remember anything, and I would remember being born in that body, which I did, except I wasn't. Anyway, that was what they did to me. In the meantime, in the process of pursuing the Phoenix Project, which was myself and this, if you want to put it, this current run of the lifetime, plus his, let's see, his original body. There's a crossover point here. I have to go back. Yes, okay, in the original body and my original time and his original body, we were involved in running back and forth in the tunnels, and he became caught in a side tunnel which wasn't supposed to exist, but did, and he disappeared in it. I had to go find out what happened, and he was trapped by some aliens. They wouldn't let him go, and they wouldn't let me go either. So finally I said, "What do you want?" He said, "We want a piece of equipment." I says, "Well, you aren't going to get it if one of us aren't let go and let loose to go get it." I said, "Where is it?" He says, "Back at Montauk." I said, "Where?" And I said, "In that ship which came in." "What is it?" And they described it, and he says, "I'll go get it if you'll let both of us go if you get the equipment." He says, "I went back, I got it." Is it, Preston?
Sure you can.
Okay. It was the charging device for the crystal which was used as the drive for the ship. It was not understood at that time what it was, and they didn't want us in our society and civilization at that time to have it.
This is the original Tesla design?
No, this is the ET piece of equipment, ET equipment off the ship. They wanted that charging device back, so we didn't have it. It was agreed if I brought it back that they would release both of us. They got it, they released us. In the meantime, unbeknownst to them, his time locks dissolved because they didn't have a reference in the time stream. We were in a time zero artificial reality which they had created. So when he went back, no time references, his body starts to age very rapidly, like about a year per hour. So in 21 days, in spite of best efforts, the original body died. It was arranged in the meantime. I go back and see the father, "Hey, get busy, make another son." That son was born in 1951 and 1963 at the exact node point between the 20-year sequence. He was a walk-in into that body at the age 12 from 83. Now, how all of this was accomplished in terms of technology and metaphysics, I can't answer, because I don't know, but it was done. He has the memories, I have the memories. The research, which has been done by Preston, shows quite conclusively in terms of mathematics and otherwise that this all fits. So when he now has the memories, they've come back, and of course he was chosen to be part of the Phoenix Project, the later run of it as he became involved. I was also chosen to become involved with it, and I was involved with it for years. Both of us were.
Which aliens held you in
And we don't know which group it was, but it was the friends of, as part of the same group of the ones who were trapped underground. They came out alive, all 7 of them. And we worked with them for a while. 3 of them decided to talk. Pruitt was very much concerned about an alien invasion, and apparently quite correctly so. And he gave me the assignment of getting these guys to talk, finding out what their language is, decoding it, learning what was in their manuals, and trying to figure out what made their ship stick. Well, this is a little bit out of time sequence in a way, but nevertheless, we don't know where it fits in terms of absolute time and not temporal time to this dream. But as I remember, 3 of them talked. We learned what we needed to. The other 4 didn't like it. They never talked. One of them was apparently the captain of the crew. They murdered the 3 that talked. Those 4 were then put in deep freeze. And they remained until the station went down and all the power was shut off eventually, and they probably deteriorated after that.
Now, were they captured like in 47 time or in 83 time?
83 time. They started in 43 and wound up in 83.
And they didn't get back like you did?
No, they did not get back. Though the others that we ran into on the side chute of this tunnel, we were told never go down a side chute. He said, they don't exist theoretically, but we know they're there. They've had reports apparently of it. He said, don't ever go down and go through the main tunnel. For some reason he got distracted on the side tunnel. Why, we don't know, but it happened.
What did you learn from the aliens? You said you had to speak with them. Did you learn about their hieroglyphics, their language? Or
we learned about their language. We were able to decode their manuals, and the concern was this a vanguard of an invasion force?
And?
I'm not sure what really came out of that.
This was in 83.
This was in the, well, maybe it was 83, maybe it wasn't.
Right.
I say I don't know the exact point in temporal time because I've been involved in that project at so many points
Right.
that when you're taken back to your point of origin, you're more automatically erased, and I don't really know where that time was. I know that I believe the first time period I was involved with the Phoenix Project was out of Hawaii in '56. They just pulled me forward into the time period where they were operating.
Can you read hieroglyphics?
Hmm?
Their hieroglyphics, can you translate it? If you
Not
saw
now.
it?
No, I did then, but I can't do it now. Totally brainwashed since. When the project went down, we're all being brainwashing. Only in the last year have I started, year and a half, have I started to come back with any of the memories of the the Philadelphia experiment. And only in the last 6 months have I started to come back with any of the real technical knowledge.
How do you come up with these memories? They just come to you, or has it been like through
Hypnosis?
his machine? Or?
The memory process, well, it started basically in August of '85 when I came after the USB conference where I met Duncan and Preston. I had known Preston prior to that particular conference. But he invited me to come east sometime and see their lab and possibly become a part of the lab. And I said, great. So my job collapsed in the meantime. I said, okay, you want to come in up in August? And he said, fine. So I was there a few days. I was going to be there just a weekend. I wound up being there 10 or 12 days. And after about 3 or 4 days I was there, and Preston says, I want to show you 2 guys something. We're going to take a trip out into the eastern part of the island. But what he did is he took us to Montauk. Now, I'd never been there prior to this, I thought, and he had not been there prior to this, he thought. And they took us out, and we were picking up monitoring, and he was checking our monitoring of what we felt to see whether...
Monitoring with what?
The fields in the area. As we approached the town of Montauk, we were already feeling some pretty heavy crap. And as we got out to the area of the base where we parked the vehicle, which was in the parking lot of the park, and then walked in the base. As we walked in, we started to hear, what the blazes is going on here? This is horrible. This is in the broad daylight. The further in we got, and the closer we got to the main radar building, the worse it got. And finally, we were both agreeing this is something absolutely horrible took place here. And I was seeing then, psychically, so to speak, the fact that there had been a 30-foot monster roaming around that place. And I told Preston, I said, I wouldn't want to be here at nighttime for any reason. And he said about the same. But that was my reintroduction, really.
Right.
That was the basis upon which, at a later time, I started to remember. There was a lot of meetings and discussions. Eventually, there were 3 trips back. There was a famous May '86 trip, including other friends from Phoenix who I had alerted about the project, and they came via various invites, probably from the senator, to go out there, got the permit, and wanted proof of something going on there, and got into a big fiasco. But eventually, that summer, I moved to Long Island, which was August of '86, and I got a job and stayed there until March of '87 when I went back to Phoenix. But in that interim period when I was there, was when I finally, well, actually earlier, it was in May of '86, or one of my last visits before I moved there. One weekend, I just decided not to take the plane trip back. He kept insisting, I was there on the project, and I was one of the important cogs in the project. I says, not me, it must have been my double, because I've had a lot of problems for years with the double. He says, yes, you were there. And Preston sort of took a neutral position at that point. And I said, no, I wasn't. He said, yes, you were. And then finally, one Saturday afternoon, I said, okay.
Duncan said you were there.
For the sake of argument, to myself, say, okay, I was there. Suppose I was, what then? The next 2 hours, I shook like a damn leaf. I mean, I did the nervous shakes like you wouldn't believe. And when I saw that and felt that coming on, I said, oh, crap. This only means one thing. I was there. So I finally started mentally, internally, scanning up and down my timeline to see what could I find here. Is there a crack in this whole damn business of my timeline, of my time memories? I finally found the crack. It was a very narrow one. It came from Hawaii in '56, and that's a long story. No, I nailed that down, but I did. Says, all right, what's there? Boom! Down the tunnel, and there I was in Pruitt's office. And I was talking with him, and he was talking with me. He finally decided, yeah, I was the person he was looking for, and the person he wanted on this thing, and so on. I said, oh, crap. I was part of this thing. And the strangest thing happened that night after Preston came back. I canceled my plane flight. I canceled the turn-in of my rental car. So about 7:30 in the evening, Preston gets a mysterious phone call. Is Mr. Bielek going to pick up his plane ticket for the flight this evening? I already had the ticket. It was already too late for the flight. It was already over. A little while later, another phone call. Is Mr. Bielek going to turn in his rental car? And I was too late to turn it in. Third phone call about something or other related to me, and then another phone call came from someone alleging to be Mr. William Van Bice, who I knew very well, and Preston knew not too well, but he knew him. Speaking on the phone in a very drunken voice, you're Preston Nichols? Yes. I don't like you. I don't like you because you have stolen my work. You've done this and this and this and this and on like this in a very drunken tone of voice. He's saying to me, he says, Bill. I said, why? I said, this guy is talking like he's drunk out of his mind and blaming me for everything. And I said, we'll find out when he gets off the phone. So I immediately called up Bill, got him immediately in California. I said, Bill, did you just call Preston? He said, call Preston? He said, I haven't talked with him in months. And he was perfectly sober. And I knew he was sober because he'd gone on the wagon, on the water wagon. I said, why? And I told him why. He says, I didn't call. I said, I don't know what this is all about. This whole string of mysterious phone calls that night, which we have never been able to figure out where they came from. But it meant I'd hit the jackpot. And somebody was monitoring the fact that I had finally tumbled to the Phoenix project. Well, so far as the Philadelphia experiment is concerned, how I remember that is somewhat different. In 1984, the summer of '84, about August, EMI Thorne of England released a movie entitled The Philadelphia Experiment. which a lot of you may have heard of. And that showed at Sedona, Arizona for a week. I was in Sedona at the time. Friends went to it. They didn't invite me. And I went and was going to go see it, but I never made it. And 2 weeks later, it was totally missing from the American scenario. It was gone. Well, the story, which turns out much later, was that 3 days prior to its release, EMI Thorne in England got a letter from the U.S. government saying, we don't want this movie shown in the U.S. We just don't want it shown, period. And EMI Thorne said, well, what do we do? I said, well, let's play dead like we never got the letter. We already have our commitment dates for release in the U.S. We'll just go ahead and release it, which we did. Got another letter from the U.S. government. We don't want this movie shown, period. So EMI Thorne couldn't ignore the second communication, so they fired back, and if you want it stopped, he said, you're going to have to get a federal court order banning it. And he says, we will. And they did. Banned for 2 years. Now, in '86, they got a counter-injunction releasing the first one, and it was shown from that point on, from '86 on, as a tape.
Can that be proven? But I mean, if there was a federal court order, it should be a record.
It should be, but we haven't pursued it. Well, this is the information which basically Preston turned up because he became involved in this thing for another reason.
But that's very unusual for like a science fiction movie. I mean,
Yeah, for a science fiction movie, right. Well, in any case, came December of '87. About 4 a.m. one morning, I was watching HBO. I just happened to tune in on the tail end of a movie which they had shown, and they said, well, for our next feature tonight, we will show the Philadelphia experiment. My ears went up like this, and I said, oops, I'm staying up to watch this thing, because I had not seen it and wanted to see it. So it went on from 4 until about 6 or sometime with commercial breaks and all of that. And they first turned this thing on and started going through the initial sequences, and the two main characters in the movie, I looked at this thing and I was turned inside out. I said, what the shit is this all about? What does this mean to me? At that point, no memories. After 4 viewings of this video, it started to come back. It had literally had to hit me over the head 4 times before the memories finally started to come through. And at that point, he hadn't even seen the movie or the video. March of '88, there was a music festival in Lexington, Kentucky, called EKU Music Festival, Eastern Kentucky University. We all went down to it, and I brought the video with me. I bought it in the meantime. And I said to Preston and Duncan, I said, let's get a video player, because they had TV equipment in the motel rooms. I asked Duncan, you ever seen it? No. I said, would you like to see it? Yeah. So we rented a video player. I showed it to him. He went absolutely inside out when he saw this thing, particularly one sequence in the end.
He tried to crawl into the light outlet.
Literally, threw furniture around, crawled under the little table between the 2 beds.
Preston?
Yes, Preston. When he gets disturbed, it becomes physically very violent. I mean, he can smash furniture. Now, he didn't literally try to smash furniture, it got thrown, tossed. He tried to crawl on the light outlet, and I said, Duncan, it's over. He says, come on out of here. And he says, well, so I guess one could learn to live like this. And he crawled out from underneath, and we tried to figure out what was this all about. Well, every time he's seen the movie since, he's turned inside out, though a little less each time. The last time I showed it was quite recently, during the period of my trip here, and he was getting quite upset even during the showing of the same sequence, which is near the end of it. And it has a very, very powerful impact for him. It does for me, too.
What is Duncan's original birthday?
His original birthday?
Yes.
15 May 1917.
okay. This one.
And we just want to follow it. And then, and
1917?
Yeah.
1917. And your original birthday?
For August 1916.
At that time, what was the relationship between the two of you?
Brothers, half-brothers,
Okay.
because we're the same father but different mothers.
Complex unified field theory. Many scientists believe that strong concentrations of magnetism, such as occur in the triangle, might actually alter the molecular structure of matter, causing it to disappear, or even be pulled into another dimension. Following publication of his startling book in 1955, Dr. M.K. Jessup, the world-renowned astronomer and scientific philosopher, received a letter that was to add a new dimension to his life's work. Dr. Jessup's book had called upon his colleagues in the scientific community for a reappraisal of Einstein's disturbing unified field theory. But he was totally unprepared for the letter.
My dear colleague, for reasons that will become apparent, I shall identify myself only as Carl W. Allen, and inform you, as my conscience demands, that Einstein's theory has been brought to reality with some shocking results. The Philadelphia experiment was the code name for secret tests conducted by the Navy in October of 1943 aboard the USS Eldridge, a destroyer that had been specially fitted with unique electrical and electronic equipment. For all intents and purposes, the tests were for camouflage development. Based upon the Einstein calculations, the Navy had 4 huge generators especially designed and built. These were to produce massive flux fields, which, when counterposed, would create an envelope of sorts about the test ship, a magnetic smoke screen, if you will.
We've installed 4 generators on the destroyer. 1 on the flying bridge, 1 amidships, and 2 aft. When we begin this experiment, the varying potentials of the generators should alter the structure of the atmosphere around the ship, resulting in a color combining with the sea.
You mean to make the destroyer invisible?
Not strictly, sir. The ship will be hiding under a traveling magnetic canopy of sorts.
We're ready, sir.
Good. Please be seated, sir. Proceed with the countdown.
Now hear this! Now hear this! All stations stand by for ready report.
Station 4, all systems. Station 6, after bank loops closed and reading.
Shunt power to start.
We have a ready from the Eldridge, sir. Lock monitor. We have a command. Coming up on the mark and counting. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
After the test was completed and the equipment shut down, the Eldridge vanished again, for no reason.
Hey, it's coming back.
The Eldridge reappeared just as suddenly a few minutes later. The immediate after effects produced retching sickness and considerable painful symptoms among the men. Horrid. But what happened later was far worse. The test was an unqualified success for the equipment, Jessup, but an utter failure for the crew that had been exposed to something far worse than nuclear radiation. Only the lucky ones went mad.
Yeah, I saw him there. Don't tell me he wasn't there. Don't tell me he wasn't there. I saw him. Then right next to me, and I looked over at him. He was gone. He was very long. He was gone.
Many of these poor men continued to experience a trans-dimensional phenomenon, completely destroying any chance they may have had for normal lives. They've become freaks, Jessup. Freaks that were quickly and carefully snatched into seclusion. To avoid embarrassing questions, they've become nothing more than carefully preserved specimens, Jessup. I've seen them myself. Human beings reduced to the level of laboratory animals. My dear Jessup, in our responsibility to science, can we forget our humanity? I leave it to you to decide if further work shall be put into this or not. I write in hopes there will be.
Allen's letter set Jessup upon an exhaustive 5-year search for the truth. And in spite of threats, insults, and coercions, Jessup continued to probe right up to the last bizarre moments of an April night in 1959.
Listen, I've reached some fantastic conclusions regarding that Philadelphia experiment, and I've got to see you right away.
How about tomorrow?
No, right away, tonight.
Fine.
Good, I'll be there in an hour with all my notes.
But neither Jessup nor his papers ever arrived at that meeting. Why?
Suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning. White male Caucasian, approximately 62 years. No papers, notes, or effects. Dispatch coroner and ID unit.
No papers or effects were found with Dr. Jessup's body. Why? Did such a fantastic project as the Philadelphia experiment ever really take place? We don't know for sure, but to date, at least a dozen books have been written about it. The key question is this. Did the government have a top-secret project involving the Eldridge and an application of Einstein's unified field theory? A Princeton scientist who claimed he worked on the early stages of the project says that he saw a handwritten sheet of complex mathematical calculations pertaining to the project, and that he recognized the handwriting as that of Albert Einstein himself. Some people claim that high-ranking research officers persuaded the Navy to let them use this ship, the Eldridge, just as soon as she was built. Interestingly, the logbook for the Eldridge is missing. The pages for the first 3 months of her service. Why? This is a picture of the dry dock where the Eldridge was built, filed top secret for 22 years. Another interesting note is that the Eldridge later experienced an unusually high desertion rate. For some reason, her crewmen kept jumping ship in greater than average numbers. Could it be that there was still some lingering after effects of that mysterious experiment? In this era of vigorous investigative reporting, as demonstrated by such exposés as the Pentagon Papers and Watergate, we find it baffling that even after 35 years, witnesses still refuse to talk about the Philadelphia experiment. And it is worthy of note that the Office of Naval Research categorically states that the incident never took place. This is the book by Jessup, which sparked Allen's letter. In it, Dr. Jessup theorizes that UFOs appear and disappear in a Bermuda Triangle, using much the same techniques as were reported in the Philadelphia experiment. For instance, there's the widely publicized incident that took place on January 7th, 1948. It involved a flight of P-51 Mustangs and a UFO spotted in the skies over Fort Knox, Kentucky. The police subsequently passed on the reports to nearby Godman Field at Fort Knox.
Tower. Yes, sir. Lieutenant, it's the CO. This Lieutenant Michaels. Yes, sir. We've had visual contact with whatever it is for the last 5 minutes. No, sir. I checked with Wright Field. They have no experimental aircraft in the area. No, sir. I have no idea what it is. Yes, sir. Where is it? It's right out there. Well, sir, it seems to be gold. It's round. It has a red border at the bottom and a red border at the top, but only intermittently.
What seems to be the problem, Lieutenant?
Beats me, Colonel. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Excuse me, sir. There's 4 P-51s approaching from the south, probably on their way to Stanford Field.
We'll contact the flight leader. Tell him to take a look at it.
Yes, sir. This is Godman Tower to flight leader of flight approaching field. Come in, please. Over.
This is Captain Mantell, flight leader of Flight 451 to Godman Tower. Over.
Captain Mantell, how do you read me? Over.
I read you loud and clear, Godman Tower. Over.
Captain Mantell, request you change to radio frequency.
The flight leader was Captain Thomas Mantell, a veteran World War II fighter pilot, one who'd survived many missions over enemy territory.
1991. Roger. Over.
Flight leader Mantell, there's an unidentified aircraft in your area. Approximate heading 210 degrees. Request to investigate. Over.
This is flight leader Mantell to Godman. Will do. Changing course to 210.
Roger.
Godman Tower, this is Lieutenant Campbell. I'm reading low fuel. Request permission to stand down. Over. Godman, this is Johnson 451. Ditto that request. Over.
Roger. Permission granted.
Captain Mantell was now on the UFO's heading and climbing fast, leaving Lieutenant Hammond, the one remaining wingman, behind. At 2:45, Mantell contacted the tower.
I see it. It's directly above and ahead of me. Ever see anything like this before, Hammond?
Captain Mantell, not in my experience, Captain. Throttle back, sir. I'm losing you.
Godman, this is Mantell. I have the bogey fixed now. I'm closing in on it.
Tower to Mantell. Can you describe it?
Mantell to tower. The object appears to be a metallic substance of tremendous size.
He's getting closer to it.
Where are they?
Right there, sir. Can you see him?
Mantell to tower. The object in front of me is completely unreal. I'm going to try to close in for a better look. I'm going to 20,000 feet.
Level off, Captain, until I regain visual contact.
Do you read me?
This is Hammond to Mantell. Do you read me? Do you read me, Captain? Do you read me?
Mantell, do you read? Over. Tower to Mantell. Come in, please. Over.
Godman, this is Lieutenant Hammond. I've lost visual and radio contact with flight leader. Is he reading you? Over.
Stand by, Hammond.
I can't see him anymore either. And that thing, it's gone into the clouds.
This is Godman Tower to flight leader Mantell. Do you read? Over.
Let's see what you found there.
Here you are, sir.
A thorough review was made of the many eyewitness accounts, which all agreed. Mantell's plane exploded at 3:15 p.m. But when the pilot's watch was found, it had stopped at 3:10, 5 minutes before the explosion. In aircraft disasters, the wreckage always includes large structural pieces and intact parts. But the largest fragment of Mantell's plane was no bigger than a tin can lid, punctured with hundreds of tiny holes no earthly force could have produced. Authorities admitted they had never seen such strange salvage parts before, and they were unable to explain the unusual holes in the remnants of Mantell's plane. Could a magnetic storm created by a UFO have caused such damage? Is there something or someone out there in the void of space? Let's consider the possibilities.
To an astronomer like myself, the idea of intelligent life being confined to our tiny little planet Earth is ridiculous. Why, in our own small galaxy alone, there are more than 10 billion star systems. By the laws of mathematical probability, there must be 40 to 50 million planets, like our own, each with their intelligent life forms. Perhaps even now they are attempting to contact us.
Perhaps it was an emissary from one of these other worlds who attempted to make contact with our first men in space, the astronauts. The men who fly in these giant spaceships are highly skilled professionals. They have been trained to deal with almost any situation that might occur. When they spotted bogies or unidentified craft, they reported precisely what they saw.
Clear. 7, go ahead.
Bogey at 10 o'clock high.
This is Houston. Say again, 7.
So we have a bogey at 10 o'clock high.
Roger.
Gemini Control here again. The reference in that conversation was bogey. This is Gemini Control in Houston at 4 hours, 24 minutes into the flight.
Of all the sightings took place aboard Apollo 11 on its way to the moon for the first moon landing. The ship was one day out, on July 16th, 1969, when they spotted an unusual object. It had a sizable dimension to it. At first, the crew thought it was the Saturn IV booster rocket and called Houston for confirmation. Houston informed them the booster in question was some 6,000 miles away. The object remains unknown. During the Skylab 3 second manned flight, on the 23rd day of 1973, at sunrise, a series of 4 exposures were made by the crew of a visually sighted unidentified flying object, or satellite, as considered by the NASA Photo Interpretation Laboratory. The Skylab crew noticed a large star-shaped object, brighter than a planet or star. They watched it for about 10 minutes. They estimated its distance as from 30 to 50 nautical miles from Skylab. It, too, remains an unknown, despite North American Air Defense and NASA's attempt to identify it. Later, a cylindrical-shaped object giving off a phosphorescent glow was to be sighted in the night sky over Robbins Air Force Base in Georgia. At 2:45 a.m., Captain C.S. Childs and First Officer J.B. Whitted were piloting a routine Eastern Airlines flight number 576 from Houston to Atlanta. When Whitted reports, we sighted an object coming toward us. This strange object had a stream of red fire coming from its tail, and I could see it was much larger than anything I had seen or read about. Childs then notices that the object had no wings supporting it. It passed us on the right side. Its speed was about 700 miles per hour. And both men get a very good look at this unusual object. It was about 100 feet long, shaped like a cigar. As it passed, they clearly saw 2 rows of windows, an upper and lower, that were large and square. During that evening, there was a third witness, the one passenger who was awake on that Eastern Airlines flight, Clarence McKelvey.
I was startled, frightened. A male steward came to me and said, "I noticed you've been looking out the window. Will you talk to the pilot?" And I said, "Well, of course." The pilot came down with his clipboard, He was visibly shaken. He told me that he had been a flyer in the war and had covered so many million miles of flight and had never seen anything like this before. What was it that I saw? Well, I saw this object. It was cigar-shaped. It had a row of windows. Behind them, it was lit. Out of the rear was a cherry red flame.
This hair-raising experience was witnessed by 3 aircraft, a passenger, and ground observers added more corroboration. The conclusion of an air intelligence report was that the object remains unidentified as to origin, construction, and power source, and goes into the record classified as unknown. This is the Pentagon, Washington, D.C. And this man is Colonel Bill Coleman. He was Chief of Public Information for the United States Air Force from 1969 to 1974.
It was here at the Pentagon that the Defense Department first became interested in the UFO phenomenon. This occurred in the late 1940s, with reports about objects and lights seen in the sky by military personnel and others. The Air Force decided to investigate the matter anyway. There was that one possibility that these flying objects could well be foreign weapons used for test purposes and might affect our national security. The investigative branch was called Project Sign. The project had only been underway for about 2 weeks when the Mantell crash had made headlines across the nation. The staff's investigation was far from complete, but public pressure was enormous, and they were forced to come up with an answer to really quiet growing speculation that Mantell had been killed by hostile aliens in some flying saucer. That's when we decided that Mantell had chased the planet Venus. However, this was an initial finding. The Chills and Whitted case had an impact on the Air Force project. It presented the first close-up account by highly reliable witnesses. The object described led some of the staff to postulate an extraterrestrial theory. And they wrote up an estimate of the situation, which at the time was classified top secret, suggesting that the saucers were from outer space. This theory was rejected by the Air Force Chief of Staff, General Hoyt Vandenberg, and even other Project Sign staff members as not having enough proof. So the extraterrestrial visitation idea was dropped for the time being.
It's been said in jest that if these UFOs are from other worlds and they wanted it to be known, all they'd have to do is land on the White House lawn. But an incredible incident, too quickly forgotten in time, took place over our Capitol. In 1952, Air Force spokesman for the Pentagon and UFOs at that time, Mr. Al Chop, relates the famous incident that stirred the Capitol, causing a request from even President Truman to be kept up to date on all the details.
There were radar reports of unidentified flying objects over the nation's capital. We had 3 reports. One came from Andrews Air Force Base radar control room, and 2 from the radar controls at Washington National Airport. The first sightings consisted of a number of unidentified targets picked up on radar. Then a call was placed from National to the Andrews Air Force Base flight controllers. They were apparently tracking the same targets. Then Andrews reported a visual observation of 3 objects that were apparently in the same position as those indicated by our radar sets. The targets stayed on radar until about 12:30 a.m. They moved slowly at first, about 100 to 200 miles per hour. Then one of the targets sped away at a fantastic rate of speed. It moved west from Andrews toward Riverdale.
Army 142.
The estimated speed was 7,300 miles per hour. At this time, in the tower, we had about 7 targets on the radar scope. These unidentified objects were flying all over the city. They even violated the restricted air corridors here over the White House and over the Capitol building.
The phenomena wasn't to subside. The following Saturday night, July 26th, a repeat performance unsettles the Capitol again.
I was awakened the following Saturday night around midnight by a telephone call to my home in Virginia. It was the public information officer for the Federal Aviation Authority. He told me the air traffic control radars were again picking up a large number of UFOs over the capital area. First they would follow a definite flight path, and then they would suddenly disappear. Others would come into view just as suddenly. I placed a phone call to the command post in the Pentagon, and I asked for an intercept. About 2:40 a.m., we got a radio call from a flight of F-94s, 2 aircraft in the flight.
7 miles.
They also, at about that moment, appeared on our scope. And at that moment, a very frightening thing happened to us. All of our unknown traffic completely disappeared the moment those aircraft came on the scope. The flight leader called in and said, well, it doesn't look like we're going to do any good here, so we're going to go back to base. And at the very moment those aircraft disappeared, all of our unknown traffic appeared again on our scope. And again, it was a very frightening experience. We called Andrews Air Force Base, and they reported exactly the same thing happened to their scope.